So, could this one simple trick save the BBC? Well, that's nice and clickbaity, isn't it? But I might be able to justify that. So what am I talking about? Obviously, this is Donald Trump's threatened claim to sue the BBC. And as I discussed in my previous video, he's intending to sue in Florida. As I explained, he wouldn't be able to sue in the UK because of the limitation point in that you have to sue within 1 year of the first time something's broadcast, and merely repeating the broadcast doesn't reset the clock. So it's out of time on that. But in Florida, the limitation period is 2 years, so he would be in time. But I've discussed in the other video, there's the issues about he would have to show publication in the US, in the jurisdiction. And as far as I've been able to gather, the Panorama program was never lawfully available in the US. Even if you used a VPN, you couldn't get access to iPlayer. Yes, there's BBC News over there and things like that, but apparently they didn't show Panorama. So feel free to correct me in the comments if you can find that, but my understanding is there was no lawful broadcast. And if somebody else did it, then arguably the BBC didn't publish, and that's an element of the claim. However, this issue as to where you actually have the claim, like I say, it's what's the appropriate forum. And when we get into this, you can look at, there's quite often multiple places you can sue. We call it conflict of laws. It's like international, it's like private international law. And I've given the example before of the English holidaymaker, on the Italian side of the Alps, throws a snowball, hits a German holidaymaker on the, did I say Italian? On the, I can't remember where the Alps are, on the other side of the Alps, French, yeah. And he decides to sue. Where can he sue? Well, he could sue possibly, arguably, in any of the 4 potential countries, because he could sue, say, well, I am the claimant, so I'm going to sue in my hometown. You're the defendant, I'm going to sue in your hometown. You threw the snowball in France, so that's where the action was carried out. That's when the wrong was done. But I got injured in Italy, so that's where the harm occurred. And this is going to be the thing with the defamation. It's like, where did the harm occur? Well, Trump's going to say, it occurred in the US, it affected my reputation there. That's where my reputation mainly is. So these are all the factors, and courts will look into things like this when you're arguing about where where you should bring the claim. But I mentioned before that all things being equal, it's the first court seized of the matter, as we say, that retains jurisdiction. So if, for instance, it was possible to sue in both England and also America, and somehow the case started in England, well, the English court would keep it. So, is there any way that the BBC could actually force this into the English court? Possibly there is. Let's say, for instance, to give a sort of standard commercial law example, it's an IP, it's a trademark dispute or something like that. And one company says, we own the copyright, so we're going to sue you because you're infringing on our copyright. But the other party, they say, well, actually, it's our copyright and we could actually sue you. Well, the first side that sues, they bring the claim, and then if the other side is saying, no, it's actually our IP, they would be bringing the counterclaim. But in that case, let's say the companies, one company's in France, one company's in England. If the first company in France sues in France, then the proposed defendant stroke counterclaim people, they'd have to defend the claim and bring the counterclaim in France. If, however, the English company said, we'll sue first, then the French company would be the defendant stroke counterclaim, but it'd all be dealt with in the English courts. So, can the BBC sue Donald Trump first? Yes, they possibly can. Now, what would that be about? Well, it'd have to be on the same issue. Okay, so what's the flip side of you being sued for defamation? Well, what the BBC could do is they could issue a claim in the High Court for a declaration that they did not defame Donald Trump. Okay, what's a declaration? A declaration is where you need a court to decide on a matter of fact. So you're not necessarily suing for damages or anything. You just say, look, we've got a dispute as to what a factual situation is, and we'd like your decision on that, please. Crops up a lot with in property law with boundary disputes. Where is the boundary between these properties? You're not suing at the moment because no loss has occurred. But say, you want to sell a property, you need to know exactly where the boundary is, and you can't agree between yourselves, and you've got all the old deeds and maps, and you're having to track down 9-year-old guys to say, when you were 8 years old, can you remember where the old oak tree used to be? Because that's apparently what, that's on the boundary and it's vanished now. So this crops up a lot. So you'll say, yeah, we want a declaration that the boundary runs here. And the court will do that, and then that's an official binding thing that, you know, works in future litigation. So the flip side of, you know, being sued for defamation is to sue saying we didn't defame. There's also actually something called a declaration of falsity, where again you're not going for damages and you just sue and say we want the court to confirm that what we said, what the other people said, is false. We're not going for damages, but we just need the correcting. That's probably a subject for another video, and I don't want to get into it too much because, like I say, it might confuse matters with what the BBC would be asking for. So the BBC say we want a declaration that we didn't defame Donald Trump. Then if he issues, when they bring their motion to dismiss, which they obviously would, in the Florida court, they would say, well, we should dismiss this on a couple of grounds. There's the jurisdiction point about not publishing in the jurisdiction. But before we get to that, we say the Florida court isn't appropriate because the English courts are already dealing with this. It's a, you know, I'm not guaranteeing it would work or anything, and I've asked around, and people, you know, it's an interesting scenario, so nobody's got any strong opinions on it. But you know, you just go and say, well, the English court's already got it. I mean, would the English court accept the claim? Well, you may as well issue it, because by the time they've sort of like listed it and processed it and things, you're already buying lots of time. And I don't want to sound too cynical, but it's in the BBC's best interest to drag this out, because unlike most civil claims where your estate can inherit the claim, defamation claims die with the claimant. I mean, I'm not suggesting they just sort of try and drag it out for 10 years, but I bet there are some people at the BBC thinking that. But yeah, so they start that, and it's only about 528 quid to actually, you know, issue the claim. Obviously, then there's other money things. Now, the danger for the BBC, of course, is that say the court comes back and says, actually, we find, because what you'd be suing is you'd be saying we want certain facts. So you know, it's not a legal decision we particularly want; it's a factual decision. But what if the court came back and said, actually, we find that what you said and did was defamatory? The trouble there is, if then Trump is able to sue in Florida, we get into this what we call res judicata, sometimes called issue estoppel, which is, well, actually, this has already been decided. The way issue estoppel res judicata works is it has to be between the same parties. I mean, this cropped up in the Amber Heard thing, where when the US trial was going on, she said, well, the US court should be bound by the decision of the English court. But there, she had explicitly said, I am not a party to this, I am a witness. This case is between the Sun and Dan Wootton and Johnny Depp, and therefore I'm not a party, so res judicata hadn't applied. But if she'd have actually been, you know, a claimant, defendant in that case, then the American court might have said, this has already been dealt with and we're not going to go over the same ground. But that is the danger for the BBC. That's the flip side to the BBC, that if the English court came back and said, actually, forgetting all the limitation stuff, but just as a matter of fact, yes, we find this was a defamatory statement and it was made, you know, maliciously in the defamation sense, which isn't the same as the regular sense. It means you make a statement either knowing it's not true or being reckless, you just don't care whether it's true or not, you've not done your due diligence. So that is one possibility. And bearing in mind that if this gets to America, where they have the American rule on costs, I mean, over here, loser pays winner's costs, but over there you pick up your own costs, generally speaking. I mean, they can actually award costs against people, but that's as a sanction for misconduct, not just as a, you know, sanction for losing the case. So they're not going to recover the money, so they may as well do everything they can at this stage to try and get it kicked out. I mean, in terms of these declarations, one example I can think of was a copyright dispute. Somebody called Nancy Stufer was claiming that J.K. Rowling stole all her ideas from a book she'd published, self-published. And she kept saying this, but she didn't sue, because, you know, Rowling said, well, if that's so, you know, sue me for breach of copyright, let's have this in court. But she didn't. She just kept saying it, but she didn't sue. So Rowling went off and she saw a declaration that she had not infringed the copyright. I mean, that's an interesting case in itself, because it goes into forensic typeface analysis. Because Rowling's lawyers were able to show that some documents somebody had produced saying, this shows that all my ideas predate yours. They're able to go in and go, no, that font, you've done it in this font, and Microsoft didn't produce that font for Word until after, like several years after you're claiming that this document was produced. So it's very interesting there. But yeah, I mean, like I say, it's just a thought. And this is the whole point of, like, you know, litigation. It's quite often not about the merits of the case. It's about the sort of tactical thing. But I do think there is a potential there, because I know, it's not an abusive process or anything. You can take advantage of you're just taking advantage of the rules, but quite legitimately, because you've got your shot in there first. So yeah, it might well be that, I mean, if I was advising the BBC, I would say, right, just issue the claim for the declaration and just see what happens, because it's very difficult to see a downside to this, other than, like, the English court saying, actually, we find, it was defamatory, and then their issue was stopped in any American proceedings. But I'm not sure that would happen. So there you go, just a few thoughts. As always, hope you found that vaguely interesting, vaguely accurate, vaguely informative. Again, sorry for the dearth of videos. I've just been so busy with, like, both, work, and also I've been doing some of the advocacy training. So I was up in very drizzly Bristol last weekend, teaching the ethics course. Well, I say teaching, sort of like being there while the ethics course was being taught. It's really interesting, actually. Maybe at some stage I should actually just go through the exercises with you. I'll wait till we've done the course, because I don't want to tip off any future barristers doing that course. But it's quite interesting, because we always say there are no wrong or right answers, especially if you ask the BSB what the wrong or right answer is. Oh, just do what you think's best. No disrespect to the BSB there, lovely people. I've had quite a few dealings. No, actually, it's all very interesting. But yeah, I'll chat about the ethics thing at some stage in the future. But now, for the time being, I'm just going to go back inside where it's nice and warm.